As I say, one of my great irritations in life is this game that is played by folks in Hollywood and the entertainment community where they make a bunch of content and they do it with politics explicitly in mind. And then if you respond to that, then it's you who are being oversensitive. So if you say that The Shape of Water, aka Grinding Nemo, a movie in which a woman has sex with a fish, but only after she is helped by a communist, a gay guy, and a black woman, and she herself is mute, she helps a fish escape to her bathtub where she has sex with it. If you say this may have some left leanings, if you say this may have some political messages, then you are saying, how dare you mention that it is a great piece of art? How dare you? Who do you think you are? Right? It doesn't matter that people who have worked on the movie say it's political. It doesn't matter that critics have said it's political. It doesn't matter that viewers know it's political because it's obviously political. If you point out that it's political, no. How dare you call it SJW Splash? You're oversensitive. You're ruining the art. Just terrible. If you mention They Call Me By Your Name, which won a Best Original Screenplay or Best Adapted Screenplay last night. If you mention that that's a story about a 24-year-old dude seducing a 17-year-old dude, which means that the dude who he's seducing is underage, and that if you made that movie about a man and a woman, this would now be part of the Me Too movement. Or if you mention that if that guy who was 24 was named Kevin Spacey, he'd be banned from Hollywood for doing that in real life. No, how dare you? It's a beautiful love story that has no political agenda at all. None. No political agenda. If you mention that there are a slate of movies last night that were mediocre at best, but were praised to the skies because of the intersectionality of the people who made them. So, for example, Lady Bird, meh. Just a meh movie. It's as Sonny Bunch puts it correctly, it is a longish episode of Roseanne. Right? That if you say that, if you point out that Greta Gerwig's movie is like, it's not the worst movie ever, but it's not the best movie ever, that's because you must hate women. If you don't pay attention to, if you think that Black Panther was like a good action movie, like a nice good action flick, but it wasn't the most important movie of all time, you are politicizing it, not the New York Times, which ran 1,000 think pieces about how it was the most important movie ever, right? If you say it may not be the most important movie ever, then you are the problem and you're triggered. You see, here's the deal, folks. I'm not angry about any of this. I'm not upset about any of this. I'm just pointing out the hypocrisy of people who overtly state that they are acting in political fashion. Then the minute you say, well, you know, I'm not really fond of politics being shoved in my face, they go, oh, clown nose on. No, we're just your jesters. We're just your entertainers. We're just here to entertain. So what really ripped the mask off last night is Jimmy Kimmel made a joke in the middle of the Oscars. First of all, of course, Jimmy Kimmel was asked back because now he is, as Guy Benson puts it, the Pope of Hollywood. He is the secular Pope. And Jimmy Kimmel, who somehow has elevated himself from staring at boobs on the Man Show and asking women to find out what's in his crotch with their faces, legitimately, right? He's moved on from that to being the Me Too, anti-gun, pro-Obamacare spokesperson for the left. So he was asked last night to do his routine, and his routine was predictably not funny in the slightest. So here's my honest take on the Oscars. I did not watch 1 minute of this live, and I was much happier for it. I watched the highlights later. Okay, so I'm taking some of this on faith that he wasn't good last night. I'm taking that from the critics and the ratings, which were abysmal. I'm taking it also from seeing clips of him because they're not funny. I can't overall give you like every minute of the Oscars because I didn't watch every minute because I have a happy life. And there's no reason why I, like most Americans, should have to suffer through this garbage. But in any case, Jimmy Kimmel rips the mask off of what Hollywood has been saying for years. But it's so funny. When Hollywood says things, we're allowed to take it seriously. But if we say it in the conservative movement, then we're bad. We're terrible. So here's what Jimmy Kimmel said last night.
Of the 9 Best Picture nominees, only 2 of them made more than $100 million. But that's not the point. We don't make films like Call Me By Your Name for money. We make them to upset Mike Pence.
Okay, and the reason that gets a big laugh is because it's true. It's because it's true. So people are saying, well, you think the author of Call Me By Your Name? It's a joke. You think the author of Call Me By Your Name was really thinking of Mike Pence? No, I don't think he was thinking of Mike Pence specifically. But I am sure that the author of Call Me By Your Name was thinking, I'm making a very significant film because it's important that Americans see that homosexual love stories are just as real and intense as heterosexual love stories. I promise you that that was going through his head. Because of course it was going through his head. You wouldn't expect anything else to go through the guy's head. Doesn't mean there's anything wrong with him. Doesn't mean there's anything wrong with his motive. But to suggest there's no political motive at all is silly. Now, when I did my book, Primetime Propaganda, in 2011, I went and I spoke to dozens, 100 people who are like the top creators in Hollywood, the people who created Friends, the people who created Soap, the people who created Golden Girls, the people who created America's Funniest Home Videos, like legitimately every show that was a top show from the 1950s all the way forward to the 2000s, I interviewed somebody from that show. And the message that I got from virtually everyone is, of course we put our politics in our films. Of course we put our politics in our TV shows. Would you expect us to do any differently? And the answer was, no, I don't expect you to do anything differently. But the great lie that they hid behind was, well, we put our politics in there not because we are propagandists. No, 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 no. We put our politics in there because it's what the audience demands. When we make a show like Friends, and we have a lesbian wedding first season, or when in later seasons, Ross and Rachel have a baby out of wedlock and they're in love with each other, but we don't let them get married because that would be too conventional. When we do all of that, that's just because the audience wants to hear that perspective. It's something the audience wants to hear. And look, the ratings prove it. And were the ratings for Friends good? Yes, they were. But Kimmel points out the truth here. The truth is, Hollywood would make that stuff no matter what. Because people in Hollywood want to feel good about themselves. It's so funny. People talk about the DC cocktail parties. They talk about the DC cocktail circuit. They talk about how all these people in DC want to get together and go to these shishi parties where they hang out. That actually happens in Hollywood. Okay, talk to anyone who has worked in Hollywood. These cocktail parties, they're not as common in DC. They are really, really, really common in Hollywood. Everybody in Hollywood goes to cocktail parties. This is how they get jobs. And one of the ways they get jobs is by talking to each other about how they virtue signaled this year. They talk to each other about what kind of difference they're making for the world. Just like the ridiculous fictional creators of Google in Silicon Valley. They go around talking about how they're going to make the world better through better compression algorithms. And this is what they do. They go around talking about how their film really made a difference in lives. This is how they think, because if they really thought that they were around to just make movies of people clubbing each other with sticks and that we all laugh and enjoy them because, hey, we all like movies, they wouldn't feel very fulfilled. You know, there's a movie called Sullivan's Travels from the 1940s, a great movie. And the whole movie is about this guy who wants to make comedies. He's a comic writer, and he makes comedies, these very famous comedies, and then he decides he wants to make his deep film because he feels unfulfilled. He feels like he hasn't made his contribution to the art. And so he goes out on the road as a homeless guy, and he experiences all sorts of craziness and suffering. All this terrible stuff happens to him, and he comes back and he realizes he ends up in a chain gang, and they showed these guys comedies at night, some of his comedies, and he realizes, that's me doing something for the world. That's something Hollywood folks do not understand. Okay, they don't want to make their comedies. They don't want to just do what it is that we enjoy them doing. They don't want to make Thor Ragnarok. They want to make Call Me By Your Name. They may make Thor Ragnarok so that they can pay the bills, but what they actually want to make is Call Me By Your Name. And so when Jimmy Kimmel says, when he reveals there, that what they're actually doing is making films specifically designed so that they can feel good about themselves, that it makes them feel good to slap Mike Pence, it makes them feel good to slap people in the middle of the country, that is true. Now, when Jimmy Kimmel says it, we can all take it seriously. But if I say it, then it's because I'm politicizing the issue. I remember we did the exact same thing with regard to, for example, Joe Biden. So back in the early 1990s, there was a show called Murphy Brown. Murphy Brown had Cameron, what was the name of the woman? Candace Bergen, playing the lead. And Candace Bergen had a baby out of wedlock. And Dan Quayle said, this is not good for the country. It is better if you have mothers and fathers having babies on TV. Right? This is propaganda from the left. And Dan Quayle was ripped up and down. It was his Murphy Brown moment. How dare he suggest that this was politics? It wasn't politics. It was just TV. It was just TV. And then Joe Biden came out in the mid-2000s, right after, or the late 2008, 2009. He came out and he was talking about Murphy Brown, and he was talking about Will and Grace, and he said, of course TV has changed minds. Without Will and Grace, would people have been so accepting of same-sex marriage? And the answer, of course, is no. Propaganda has an effect. That effect is to propagandize. That's the intended goal. And so when Jimmy Kimmel says that they put profit aside to make some stuff like Call Me By Your Name or The Shape of Water, this is true. Does that mean it's deeply wrong and deeply... No. They can do whatever they want. It's a free country. That's fine. But me acknowledging that they're political is no different than them acknowledging that they are political, and that profits, while important to make sure that they boost their industry, their business is no different from my business. The difference is I'm honest about it. I am here to push a certain political point of view, to push principles that I think are important. I'm not doing it just to respond to the market. In fact, I take pride in the fact that we at the Daily Wire don't just respond to the market. It's why we make certain editorial decisions. Right? It's why we don't show the names and faces of mass shooters. I'm sure that hurts us in the click count, but that is something we are willing to do, right? We're willing to take a hit, and I'm honest about the hits that we are willing to take for a particular political view. It's why I never fell onto the Trump train to the extent that I was, talking about everything being MAGA, MAGA, MAGA genius, so I'm sure I would have made more money if I had done that. Because there are certain principles I think are important. The difference is Hollywood has principles it thinks are important, but they lie about it. They won't tell you that. They will say that they are just there to make entertaining content, and the politics are secondary. Utterly untrue, not true. Kimmel makes that suggestion. Kimmel is correct. What Kimmel says here is right. And you have to keep that in the back of your mind when you watch the rest of the Oscars, because what the Oscars really are about are not just a moment for Hollywood to award the best filmmakers and to show you what's best in film. It's not about that at all. What Hollywood's Academy Awards are really about is what Kimmel is saying. It is about the slap. It is about making people in the middle of the country feel morally less. It is about the suggestion that Hollywood is showing the best of itself. It's Hollywood's book report at the end of the year, where they demonstrate why they should be there. And according to Hollywood, the reason they should be there is not because they entertain us, not because they make movies we want to watch, but because they do important things. And so they have to reward important movies. And you can see Hollywood's shifting standards for itself over the course of Oscar history. One of the reasons that you can see that Hollywood has shifted its view of itself is the change in the demographic of the people who actually watch Oscar films. So it used to be that Oscar films between 1983 and 2003, really, virtually every Oscar film was a major winner in terms of the box office. Virtually every Oscar film did really well at the box office, at least the films that won Best Picture. Right? And so I'm going to look up the list right now, and I will tell you, there has not been an actual good movie that has won Best Picture at the Oscars, like a great movie that's won Best Picture at the Oscars, in my opinion, since 2010, and there hasn't been a box office winner at the Oscars for nearly 15 years. For nearly 15 years. It's really an amazing, amazing thing. Right? Let's look back at the Best Picture winners. So, 2016, the Best Picture winner was Moonlight, which made like $5 at the box office. Before that, it was Spotlight. Fine movie, completely forgettable. You know, I enjoyed Spotlight. I think Moonlight is a fine film. It was obviously the social justice winner because it was about gay black people in the inner city. Whatever, that's fine, but that's not exactly designed to be a box office busting winner. Okay, Spotlight won the year before that. The year before that, it was Birdman, which I thought was just an execrable film. I just thought it was an awful, awful movie. 12 Years a Slave, which I think is a very good movie, but not obviously one that's going to bust down the box office doors. Right? It's about slavery. It is not a highly entertaining film. I think it's a well-made film. I don't think it's as well-made as, for example, Schindler's List, but 12 Years a Slave is a good movie. But is it like an all-time classic movie? Probably not. Argo, which is completely forgettable now. Do you even remember Argo? I remember when it won. Like, I saw it. It's fine. It's fun. But it's not like, Argo is not an important movie. The Artist, right? None of these movies made more than $5 at the box office. The King's Speech was the last really great movie that I think was a big winner at the Oscars. The Hurt Locker was the year before that. Slumdog Millionaire, which did decently at the box office, but won over like The Dark Knight. Are you kidding me? Okay, are you kidding me? It hasn't even, that was 2008. Okay, it's been 10 years. Does anyone even watch Slumdog Millionaire now? It's a fine film. I mean, I enjoyed it, but it's not The Dark Knight. Okay, No Country for Old Men is 2007. That was the last big box office winner that actually did really, really well at the Oscars, was No Country for Old Men. So that was 2007. And before that was The Departed, which, meh. Okay, Crash, the worst movie of all time. Okay, $1 Million Baby, again, okay, but sorry, movies about euthanasia don't exactly blow it up at the box office. And then you get, but by 2003, I think it was really in the Bush era that this happened. 2003, by the middle of the Bush era, you can see the shift for Hollywood. The shift goes from, we are here to make movies that entertain you, to we are here to make movies that are specifically designed to say something important. Because before 2003, all of the movies that were winning were big box office winners. The reason this is important is the people in Hollywood, the people who vote at the Academy Awards, see their role differently. They see their role in life, seriously, as we are here in order not to make big movies that make lots of money and earn us all enormous paychecks. That's something nice that we do. But what we're really here to do is push the message. And you can see that from the Oscar winners, because before that it was Lord of the Rings, Return of the King. It was Gladiator. It was Shakespeare in Love, which did really well. It was Titanic. It was Braveheart. It was Forrest Gump. It was Schindler's List and Unforgiven. It was Silence of the Lambs. It was Dances with Wolves, right? Every other year, it was a top 5 to top 10 box office movie that was winning. And we haven't had one of those in like 15 years.
We will make America great again.